everybody. Welcome to episode 7 of Education in Color. I'm your host, Saad Kabir. Joining me today is Milton Jones, New York City Men Teach Ambassador and mentor, also retired school administrator. Milton, thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Saad and team, thank you for inviting me. I'm very delighted to be here to share with you all this afternoon, and thanks again.
Perfect. So we'll just dive right into our first question, which is, what was your educational experience like growing up, and what was your general relationship with school in general?
Well, I had a very, very unique experience in terms of education. My mother came here from the Carolinas in the mid-50s, exactly 1955, right after the Emmett Till situation. So it was a lot of things going on in the country. And I was born in October of that year, 1955. Harlem was a vibrant place, a beautiful place in many, many, many areas. I remember it just being so warm and welcoming. The education system for me was a little different, though, as a South Carolinian. Many of us were housed in schools in Harlem where there were many, many students. In certain schools, I didn't think we received the attention we needed to. But we were there, and it was quite different from the South. My academics weren't strong, and I didn't get the attention, as I said, in the school systems that I needed. And it was only until we moved outside of central Harlem into the outskirts of Harlem, specifically 104th Street, and I went to a public school called Public School 145, which was a great school. It was quite diverse in terms of its staff, quite diverse in terms of the community. The principal, and the staffing really pushed education. And from third grade on until sixth grade, I received a fantastic education. I mean, whatever I missed in Central Harlem and growing up in the tenements was augmented at PS 145. So I thank the staff there, Mrs. Freeman and Katz and that team, who unfortunately are probably no longer here, for their work, because it really impacted my later life. They got me involved in music, art, schools that I would have never thought of, Horace Mann, and it took off from there. You know, there are other things that occurred in terms of education, but it was quite a rewarding beginning. You know, just diversity, diverse staff, diverse community, and the richness of that, and the richness of my mother's background from the Carolinas, and the tenement that we lived in, mixed with many women who were from the islands of Puerto Rico. So you had this mixture of ladies who were all single parents, like my mother, sharing $1 to make ends meet, and recipes to feed the children, and babysitters that included Milton, you know, and it was a vibrant, wonderful time for me as a young man.
Thank you for that. And I want to ask, so you said you grew up in Harlem, and then you also had exposure to music early on due to your upbringing in the public school system. I guess what I want to ask is, how do you think that growing up in Harlem shaped your musical prowess, or just your interest in music in general, especially during that time?
Well, Harlem was vibrant. I mean, you had artists from all over. You of course had your R&B artists. You had jazz artists. You also had classical artists. You know, I mean, it's just, and you had fine artists, painters, artists that not only painted but performed on instruments, and so it was very, very vibrant. And my mother's household was a place where you would see not only artists from Harlem but from all other parts of the United States at that time. When we moved on the outskirts of Harlem, I think the really key point of it is my mother. That's what I'm really going back to. Her ability to just bring in a diverse community to our home, our apartment. I remember clearly even having dancers that had grown up in what I learned was a kibbutz. I didn't know what a kibbutz was. We woke up in the morning time and they were sleeping on the floor in our house. So it was the vibrance of that existed in Harlem, that, we're here to share. We're here to find interest in the next person and what their lives were about. That was inspiring to me, and that's how, I began as an artist, a young artist.
And just for our guests, what music are you the most, I want to say, proficient in? And then what, I guess, sect of music do you wish you were more proficient in?
That's a great question. Well, the public school system, this kid from growing up in Harlem, by way of the Carolinas, believe it or not, was trained as a classical musician. And there are many, many, many Black and Hispanic classical musicians in New York City. And many of us get our training in the public school system. If not for that system, we wouldn't be where we are in terms of classical music. And that's where I began in the public school system, basically as an artist. And then from art in middle school, specifically in my case, it was Joan of Arc, it transferred to classical music. And at Joan of Arc, I received a scholarship to go to Band School of Music, the prep school, which is actually 2 blocks away from where we're at right now, So the public school was really a place of transforming the lives of many, many, many young adults. You had fashion industries. It was hot. Kids, wanting to get in schools like that, the vocational schools, music and art, performing arts. And the public school was the way to go. Many of us had no exposure to it prior to that, but the programs that existed in the elementary schools and very well in the junior high schools gave us access to that. So you asked what genre of music I was trained in? Classical music. What genre would I like to have been trained in? Maybe I would have liked to have been a great R&B singer, but my sisters tell me I can't sing. So I'm a horrible singer.
Right. Well, you know what? I have to disagree, Not because you're the guest, but, whatever. But I will ask, though. So you mentioned that a lot of it came from the public school system.
Yes.
So how do you think the public school system has changed over the years in New York City, especially towards the creative piece? So to foster that creative element in children, do you think it's gotten better or worse over time?
I think more so in the middle schools, the lack of not just funding of the arts, because the fundings are there, but the lack of the schools to put an emphasis in it and to hiring teachers that can do it. And to share with the young children that are there. It could be in classical music, it could be in any kind of genre of music or dance or fine arts that we can think about. But the schools have to promote it. The parents have to demand it because we are teaching other people's children. And then we move beyond singling out groups of kids who are successful at it. And I speak specifically about our wonderful Asian students who get into many of the specialized schools and targeting them, and where we can create more schools like that. We can create capacity. I took my exam for LaGuardia 55 years ago, and it's the same exam. Right. And there's no reason that kids can't pass that exam. When I adopted my son, maybe 20 years ago, that was the first thing I did. I trained him to take that exam. So we have to begin to think that we have to put the focus on many of the middle schools taking the charge. And it's not just the arts, it's vocational training, making more of a pipeline to success for our students, making a pipeline where we're training them into careers to be a photographer or a photographer as this young man is over here, or a plumber as the guy over there, or an electrician or auto mechanic. Where are our vocational schools that we used to have when I was a student? We need those schools, and that's where we're kind of lacking in terms of supporting not only the students but their parents as well, and the community. We need to go back to that. We need that emphasis in specifically the middle schools. I think the elementary schools kind of get it a little bit, but specifically the middle schools have to begin to change the dynamics, because we lose them by the time they get into high school.
Right. And that kind of ties into the next question that I want to ask you, which is I just kind of tripped myself up with that question, but let me rephrase it. Have you ever had a male teacher of color growing up? And if so, when did you have that exposure?
Wow, that's another great question, Mr. Saad there. Surprisingly, unlike many of my colleagues and friends, my first male teacher of color was at Public School 145, and that would have been in the 60s, and around probably 1965, 1966. His name was Mr. Evans. I remember to this day. He became a local politician in the Upper West Side community. There was one other person, I don't remember his name quite well, but that was my first exposure to a male teacher of color. So I thought it was natural. There weren't many there. It was a small school. There was in junior high school, my Spanish teacher was named Mr. Batista, who later became Dr. Roberto Batista, who surprisingly became my first principal.
Oh, really?
Like that, and I wasn't a great student in this class, but I learned Spanish better from my friends in the community than from him. Just to say, but it was a great experience. And then, of course, in LaGuardia, there were one or two others. Mr. Wong, who was my Spanish, not my Spanish teacher, my math teacher. From Mr. Wong, I learned discipline and control and management, the importance of management. He was a fantastic math teacher who was a recent arrival from, I believe, Korea. And really, really high-powered, in a room full of artists who thought that they knew everything, like that. So I had a wealth of, not a wealth of, but certainly great representation of men of color in terms of teaching practices. Could have had more, wish I had more, but they were really good, the ones that I had.
Right. And how do you think having those male teachers of color as early on as your elementary years shaped your worldview and just shaped your educational view in general?
It taught me or showed me to not be surprised about it, to expect it, to not think that this is something that's out of the norm. This is part of the norm. I should see men and male teachers of color in the classroom, be it elementary school, middle school, high school, or on the university level. And I didn't start hearing that people were lacking in that until later on in life.
Right. Now, how did you start your professional career in education, and what were the thoughts that was going through your mind before you even embarked on your educational journey professionally?
Roundabout way. I had no intentions of going into education, not really at all. As I said, I went to LaGuardia, a wonderful, wonderful school. I had a scholarship to go to Manhattan Prep, the wonderful Manhattan Prep. And I played the French horn, which was the instrument given to me. I didn't know what it was, but I enjoyed it. I must have been very good at it. And at LaGuardia, I lost interest in it. There was things going on that made it difficult. I felt that I was no longer interested in it. And I would just graduate and go on to work in the factory with my mother. there was a great, again, man of color who was a guidance counselor that took all of the kids at LaGuardia, and he took us to the auditorium, and he demanded we fill out the applications to the CUNY system. And in those applications, he made sure we checked SEEK and whatever other programs that were there. And so we checked it. Everybody checked it. White, black, Hispanic, Asian kids, we checked it. And I didn't think about it. So I get in the mail about February or so that I'm accepted to the music department at Queens College. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not playing anymore. I got to do something to get myself up to speed here. In the orchestra was a great, great bassoon player named Kenny. I forget his last name. He was really, really wonderful. And though I had lost interest in playing the French horn, I gravitated to the bassoon. I was working. I had to work, so I worked in the library, and I rented one, and I just started practicing furiously for 2 months. And I took the audition, and I was accepted in the SEEK department and as a bassoon player. From there, I met my life mentor, Lauren Glickman. Lauren Glickman was a great member of the Chamber Music Society, and through him, his wife, Doris Glickman, and they became sort of like my life mentors. I much that I have in terms of just everything I attribute to them. My mother embraced them. I embraced them. I thanked them because what I gained from them was not only music, but was life learning lessons, finance, not love of family, because I love my family, but of how to manage and help my mother in better ways like that. And also a career. So I had a beginning career as a musician. I went out and made money, nice money as a freelance musician. I learned from Mr. Glickman how to bargain and network as a contractor without the union, and which is a positive and a negative. And I did that for a little while and created my own group, and we kind of freelanced here in New York. It was the call to kind of go back to help my mother and my sisters out more. I stopped touring, stopped moving around, and just be settled in New York and be more of a presence in my sister's life, who was then unfortunately battling drug addiction and so forth. And I thought that I needed to be home. I needed to help out. And I gladly gave up music to do that. And one of my friends said, "Hey, there's a job in the Bronx." But before that, I thought I'd go into law, and I got a job at the district attorney's office in Brooklyn, working with Elizabeth Holtzman. And I liked it. I did it for 2 years. No one knew really behind the scenes. I learned a lot. She's brilliant. The ADAs that worked with her at the time were extremely brilliant. I like being around that community of brilliance. But what I did not like is the idea that victims are victims, as we see in society now. The real victims are the victims, the people out there getting hurt. There's a big connection between the career criminals and it goes on and on and on and on. And I didn't want to do it. So my friend hooked me up with the principal in the Bronx, which happened to be my 7th grade Spanish teacher. So
it's kind of like it came full circle.
Yeah, I went full circle. Hi, Dr. Batista. And I remained in that school for 30 years. And I had a wonderful career,
And so since you've had a long and decorated career, do you have any advice for any budding teachers or people who are already teachers, maybe in their first year, second year, third year, on how they should navigate, the behemoth that is the DOE?
I would say learn your craft. That's the most important thing. Learn your craft. Learn. No one has. If anyone comes to you and say, "I have the answer to teaching and learning," they're selling you a ticket that's a concert that's not to be. Right. No one has this specific answer. They can only generalize. It's like going to a doctor that's a sociologist or a doctor that's a psychologist. Are we working with the group or are we working with the individual? Know your craft. Keep your ears and your eyes open. And begin to explore different ways of dealing with your population, the students you're working with. We have to get more back to the community-based organizations, as our wonderful Mayor Adams was talking about. When he talks about community policing, it's not just community policing. We got to get back to community schooling as well, because each community addresses it differently. And if we don't do that, we're losing our young people. We're losing our teachers because they don't know what to do. They want to know what to do. The kids want to know what to do. The teachers want to know what to do. And then we're saddled with, unfortunately, administrators that don't know what to do as well. And things begin to fall apart in unfortunate ways like that. And we got to get to community-based organizations again. We moved away from that in education, and so it moved away from community organizations to what we call regents, with some of the chancellors and mayors, and that was a problem. It's too large. And the same problems that exist with community-based organizations existed with the regions on a different level like that. When we go back to community-based organizations, though, we have to train people how to manage million-dollar budgets, avoid the nepotism, cronyisms, mismanagements of millions of dollars. You got to create a system like that so that we really, really can begin to think of ways to nurture children and teachers that want to do jobs, and better prepare administrators so that they're not saddled with trying to busy themselves rating teachers rather than building capacity like that. If people are sitting in jobs in administration for 30 and 40 years in their schools or their districts are failing, then why are they sitting there? And I think that's what our mayor is trying to say. He's handling and trying to handle the crime, so he's focused on that. But as we begin to focus on education, we gotta begin to move back to community concerns and change that pipeline. Get back to the vocational programs. Many of these kids that are out there are thinking to themselves, what am I gonna do? I'm 13, 14 years old. What are my job prospects? They want to know what kind of job are they going to have in the future. Many of them are moving towards being parents at 16, 17, 18 years old already like that. So vocational schools that train them, and vocational schools that lead to being into unions. So we got to get the unions involved too, and they want to get involved. The unions want to get involved. They would love to have workers. So, and I'm a union person. I love the unions. And so get them training where they can get into unions that will support them and then generate the money so that now you have people that are working and they'll be in housing and things of that sort like that. That's what we really need to do. I think personally like that.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like when it comes to community is such a vital aspect in any person's upbringing, quite frankly. Like when you grow up in a community, things are just done in a different way. I grew up in South Ozone Park, so that was a primarily West Indian neighborhood, but then there was also like Little Bangladesh, which was like by City Line, a couple blocks down. And my mom had a huge support system there because all of her friends were there. I used to call them all my aunts, my uncles, and my cousins. I got older, then I realized, you guys aren't related to me. We just happen to know each other from the community. That's exactly it. And so when you think about it that way, right, that just shows like on a smaller level, just on a one family basis, how much community can mean. But when you look at it at a bigger perspective, like a top-down type of thing, you can see that in a community, if you're modeling these things, like you're saying, vocational school, unions, etc., kids growing up, they look at that more favorably because kids are just ultimately going to model what the adults in their community are doing. So by not serving the community, you are effectively not serving the kids because when they're out of school, what are they around? What's the surroundings? What is influencing them? If it's not things that are positive, then these kids are going to start to feel a little lost, even if they're getting that education in school, that 8 hours a day. What about the other 16 hours in a day? What are they doing then?
Exactly.
And so that does tie to the next question I want to ask you, which is, how did you become familiar with New York City Men Teach initially, and what prompted you to work with the program?
Well, it goes back to your previous question. In 2005, basically we moved from community school organizations to regions. And in effect, my career stopped. The vibrance of my career, I had a very wonderful career with very wonderful Principal Sobrowski, the school had, we built a great deal of capacity. It was an elementary school. Our students were going to the best of the best middle schools. And when we changed to regions, it just stopped. I would have been in Region 1 at the time. And unfortunately, what it appeared is that for men of color, and particularly black men, there was no movement. And for those in place, it was sort of like target practice. You either, you sustain yourself and deal with it, or you're going to be out of a job like that, or you move somewhere else. I literally was told, if you want to be a principal, you got to go to Brooklyn, to my face like that. So I basically just sustained in my position until I was ready to retire. But it was not a happy situation, but I did it because I was near retirement, and I said, I'll do it. And that was my interest. When I retired, I felt that I'd go on. My mother was not well. I wanted to spend time with her. I'd go on and spend, just that wonderful time giving back. I happened to see the ad and just applied to it. And from that ad, and I thank you for asking the question, because I did want to give some homage to Richard Haynes, Shamir Stevens, Brittany Drygess, Vincent Deese, Brandon Corley, Leah King. Those were the people that I met in the beginning of NYC Men Teaching about 2014, and in a meeting. And I was just startled. I was like startled in that, how did this happen? That people really, truly began to understand my concerns of what was happening to me. It spoke to me. It spoke to my situation. Though I had a wonderful career, awards, recognition, but the last 8 years was just a stop. You can be a dean, you can write occurrence reports, but you cannot talk curriculum anymore. You cannot build capacity anymore. We will not allow you to do that. And they spoke to me wholeheartedly about what the situation was. I learned wonderful phrases like colonization of the mind, how it is sometimes not just a white-black thing, but it's sometimes our own people who stop us from moving forward like that. Fear of men of color, like that, in the workplace. And when I began to recognize that, I said, this is where I want to be. And from 2014, I invested myself in as best I can supporting, their wonderful work. Those names that I listed, there are others, but they have done a wonderful, wonderful job in terms of building its programs. I don't have the data, but the data shows that I know they've been recognized by the state, building an army of men of color in terms of what's happening in education in the city of New York.
And to speak about what you're talking about, kind of like the whole decolonization of the mind, and sometimes how it may be people who look like you that also want to hold you back to a degree. I feel like that also has to do with the culture we have in America. It's a very crabs in a barrel type of mentality where if somebody else is doing better than you, or if you're doing better and you see somebody else trying to better themselves, you're faced with a conundrum. Well, I don't think it's a conundrum, but some people are faced with that conundrum. Do I help them so that they can be like me? But the thing in the back of their mind is, oh, but what if they're better than me? Right. Or do I just not help them? Yeah. The thing is, I found oftentimes the people who do want to tear other people down and don't really want to help as much, they have a lot of insecurity in their own ability. Hence, that's why they don't want to have other people reach their potential. Because when we really think about it, we can always say that, yeah, I did it by myself. But when you really look at it, there's like 1,000 invisible hands that has put you in the place you had to be today. And so if everyone lived with that, tearing people down mindset, especially in communities of color, we wouldn't progress as much. And in some communities of color, there has been a lack of progression due to that mentality. So I do think that, with Men Teach especially, it helps to kind of unwork and unravel some of that, and really kind of opens the door to just be your authentic self, take care of one another, and actually invest in the performance, the success of your colleagues, because the absence of success or I forgot the phrase, I'm trying to remember it, but it's basically like there's more than enough success to go around for multiple people.
Yes.
Just because one person's successful doesn't mean they can't share the love. It means that if you do share the love and then that somebody else becomes successful, well, now there's just two successful people, right? Again, there's more than enough to go around. And seeing as how you are an ambassador and a mentor to New York City Men Teach, how has your experience been thus far operating in that capacity?
Well, one thing I want to say is you must have on your show Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz, if she's available at Columbia University, because you talked about a lot of things that she talks about. And I had the wonderful pleasure, meeting her through Richard Haynes and the group NYC Men Teach. And, going forward with your question, how does it impact what I'm doing with the mentees that I work with? It's just been empowering. It's been really, really empowering to be able to share, to hopefully provide them with the tools that they need to navigate it. One of the things I say to many of the men and women, because as we talk about diversity, it takes a look at embracing all to make this work. When we talk about empowering men, we're talking about empowering women. We're talking about empowering members of the LGBT community. We're talking about empowering all. That we need that to make it work. I say to them, if you're thinking it's happening, it's probably happening. Right. I think I've said that phrase to you as well, that if you think it's happening, it's probably happening. That's the first step, that there's not something wrong with you, something wrong with the other party like that. And that's the first step in terms of just releasing yourself to say, now let me figure out my next move in terms of how do I navigate this like that. And I think that through the work of Richard and the team and Yolanda has been empowering to me to pass on to the next generation of educators and professionals as you guys.
Right. Thank you for that. And I do want to ask you, what has been your proudest accomplishment during your tenure at New York City Men Teach? Because you've been here since, quite frankly, the beginning, especially since you met Shamir, Richard, etc. In 2014.
The proudest? Wow, that's a loaded question. Oh my God, it's been so many, so many. But just to see the joy, to see the capacity being built. I think one of the things that Richard and I talked about a couple of years ago, and then he began to act on, is the building up of affinity groups, where it's no longer impossible to create groups where Black men can get together and talk about concerns that are unique to Black men. Hispanic men can get together to talk about concerns that are unique to Hispanic men, and Asian men can get together and talk about concerns that are unique to them as Asian men. And through that, Richard has created what we call affinity groups. That's a very important piece, because unfortunately, a lot of times men of color get on jobs, and the microaggressions that exist prevent them from being successful on the jobs. They don't know where they're getting hit. It's from many, many different directions. It could be from staffing and staff. It could be from students and parents. It could be from administration, and it could be how their classes are set up to either make them successful or not successful. And so they need to have those avenues of dialogue. And Richard has been wonderful in creating the affinity groups and encouraging them to say, you have a right to talk.
Right.
We don't. We can move beyond the street corner, and we can speak in the barbershop, but we can move beyond the barbershop too, like that. So I think that's been a very proud thing that I like to think of, that I and Richard in discussing have been able to help to, in our quiet ways, move forward on.
Right. And that's definitely an important aspect about the work, because when you do face those microaggressions, you kind of are being hit from all sides. Like, you don't know where it's coming from, and then you're just placed on this heightened level of anxiety because you don't know when the other shoe is going to drop eventually. And so how do you, or what advice do you have for young, budding, aspiring teachers, or teachers who are currently in their early career stages dealing with some of these microaggressions, how do you think that they should, I guess, remedy the situation?
Well, again, now everybody's talking about wellness, and it is true. You need to be able to step back and reevaluate and look at it objectively rather than subjectively and say, what's happening and how do I handle it? You need to be able to have the confidence in yourself to say, I don't need to be there. If you're treating me like this, I could do this anywhere, and have the confidence in yourself. And that comes from knowing your craft. When you know your craft, you can do it anywhere. And I get that from my teacher, my music teacher, my mentor, Mr. Glickman, who, helped to create a foundation in myself, my mother. Same thing. I think a lot of it comes from her, that basically say, I know who I am and I know how to navigate myself. And with that solid belief, what we call sustainability, and that's from Gloria Ladson Billings, cultural relevance and sustainability. And you empower yourself. You begin to say, I can do this. And I know who I am, and because I know who I am, I don't have to take this. You're not allowed to treat me like this. I'm a human being. There are things that go beyond our what we call our contractual rights, right, that are our human rights as a human being. And when things and issues transfer into that, you don't have the right to do that. And I think more professionals, educators, people have to begin to make that separation. Wait a minute, you just cross into a whole nother area like that. And when you believe in yourself, you can do that. You believe in your dignity, believe in who you are as a person, believe in your beauty and your glory, and that begins to set you free. Hey, I'm not taking this, you're not treating me like that, and as we would say when I was a little younger person, like
right?
That, it's words of the I don't want to say the street, but of the community. But that's basically what it boils down to. You're not allowed to treat me like that, So.
Mm-hmm. Of course, like when you do look at it, as you were saying, there are certain points where you do have to put your foot down and actually stand your ground, and that does come from that inner confidence. Because at the end of the day, a job is a job, but there are some things that if you do cross, it's like, all right, kind of take a step back. You can't really be doing any of that just because it just infringes on, as you were saying, our rights as humans. Yes, that really does have the chance, or it does have the opportunity to do a number on somebody, especially their mental and emotional well-being, when they're having to deal with that day in and day out, especially if it's little microaggressions that they don't think, or they may perceive as, oh, this is nothing. But when you really look at it, it is something, and it accumulates into something much worse, because it's like chipping away at a piece of stone or a marble or whatever, right? Eventually you have like this big block, and then eventually it'll be ground down to dust if you keep going over and over and over again. And so that's the same way with the psyche and emotional well-being of our teachers if they experience this. It's just great one day, and then it just slowly but surely gets whittled away because of all that. And so with the work we were talking about with New York City Men Teach, what is one of your goals for the program's future? Or what is something that you'd like to see more of in the future with New York City Men Teach and the work it does with teachers of color?
Wow.
It's like a bunch of hard.
It's a good.
It's like a bunch of hard-hitting journalism questions.
I view myself as a participant. I'm riding in the cart here on the brilliance of other people, and as I see it. So, in terms of goals, I would like to see a better, and I know that you, Saad, and others are now working on it, a partnership with the CUNY system. I think CUNY creates a powerful collection of young educators. It really is a powerhouse. Anybody wanting to staff their school could go to CUNY and just load up on really wonderful prepared educators ready to do great work, like that. And I love to see a strong partnership. I know William Anders is doing a wonderful job there and working on it very, very, very well. And others, and actually doing that now, creating that partnership, So I like to see a continuation of that. It's not that it's not being done; it's doing just a continuation, because William is doing it very, very, very well, really, really very well. As I go into the workshops and see the preparation, I'm a Queens College, City College person, just powerhouse, in many of the schools, and I see them. The principals are picking you guys up like left and right, just wonderful, wonderful work going on there. So I'd like to see that, just continued and supported even more financially, and just keep that going. Better understanding of curriculum. I'd like to see that. Curriculum and assessment. I'm a believer in assessment and standards. Standards are, standards, like that, and we need standards to guide at the minimum level. That's what they're basically doing, unfortunately. But you need some sort of something, and there has to be a better understanding of them, curriculum and assessment, so that teachers are not spending an enormous amount of time trying to create publications, which they haven't been trained in the university. And they can be in the room building capacity and putting all of that energy into building capacity with their students. There's a disconnect there. Yes, of course they need to know how to plan, but there has to be a better understanding of it and how to do that. I like to see that.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Milton. Now we are moving to our final question, which is going to be a doozy. I know you're like, oh man, Saad, you asked me all these hard-hitting questions. Yeah. This is definitely going to make you a little introspective. It's if you had to go back in time, looking back, would you do anything different professionally or personally?
Whoa. Wow. Would I do anything different? Wow. I wouldn't say so. I'm so happy with my life. I really, really, really am. I've been so, I can't sit here and say I, spend time in any one religious institution. I embrace all of them. I love just thinking about a meditative state. And so I use the word blessed. When I use that, I'm talking many forms of religion, but you're talking about a kid who grandmother had a house with an outhouse in the Carolinas, to now owning more than one home, very nice homes, and thinking of how to invest so that my family members can be well off, like that. And I'm very blessed. I've been very blessed through my mother, who was a wonderful, wonderful mother who embraced the world, all cultures. We, as kids, we had people from India in our house. My sister was a guy from India, wanted to date her at the age of 16. We didn't know where he was from. He said he's from India. We, as I said, kids from a kibbutz. I was 13 years old. We learned about Israel. We had kids, of course, from the South and kids from Africa. And it was just her way, of embracing the world. And I think through her, we just was exposed to a lot. I wouldn't change that, I wouldn't change it. We didn't have much in terms of money, but we didn't know it. She didn't allow us to know it like that,
Thank you for that, Milton.
And thank you.
Actually, before I move on to let you do your round of shout outs and everything, I actually do want to shout out Milton because, funny enough, I guess it's like a little trivia piece because I don't think a lot of the audience know this, but Milton was actually one of my first mentors at City College. I met him, I think, in 2017, 2018. He was doing a wonderful workshop at City College for the Men Teach chapter there. And I forgot what it was. We struck up a conversation. I was like, all right, let me take your bags for you downstairs. And ever since then, it was just like, all right, cool. I'll be on pack mule duty every day, every time you come over. But it led to some very, very riveting conversations. And Milton's always been the type of guy who has been very, very supportive of any entrepreneurial ideas I've had. And he's always been the type where he's very, very, very committed to making sure our teachers are not only emotionally prepared, content prepared, but they're also going to be financially prepared, because Milton's always about that. Get your money.
That's right.
So with that being said, Milton, I thank you. But do you have any stakeholders, people that you'd like to shout out? You could just look to that camera right there and shout them out.
Well, again, of course, Richard Haynes, buddy, you're very quiet, but you're behind this 100%. Shamir, Brittany, Leah King, Corley, Vincent Deese, Shamir. Did I say Shamir already? William Anders, the City College portion there. Thank you all. I really, really, truly thank you. Whatever I'm doing next, I thank you all. And these are young people, and and thank you from the bottom of my heart.
And the best part about it is he mentioned William, Shamir, and Richard. That is episode 1, 2, and 3. Not in that exact order, but you guys can check the YouTube and check it out. But with that being said, that does wrap up episode 7 of Education in Color. Thank you, Milton, so much for stopping by, and having this great discussion with us. But with that being said, we will see you guys next time for episode 8.
Okay. Bravo, signore.